So let's have a look at Genesis 1. Genesis 1, 26 to 30. We're told there that God creates mankind and he commands them to increase and populate the earth and subdue it. And they appear to be different commands that are given to Adam and Eve, who are to kind of be in the garden and kind of to produce a family in there, basically. And in Genesis 1, humanity there is told that they can eat of any of the vegetables that are grown on the earth.
Spread across the earth, too, right?
Yeah. Later on, they're told that, aren't they, once they're kicked out of the garden? On. Yeah. Prior to that, they're not, though.
I think that's right. So this is getting to one of the big exegetical debates that most Christians are unaware of.
Yeah.
So Genesis 1 and 2 are really different accounts of creation. Mm-hmm. And so how do we think about them?
Yeah.
Some Christians have really understood them to be recapitulatory stories. So one way I was taught was that there's these 6 days, and then Genesis 2 and 3 are kind of zooming in on day 6. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of tensions with that. One of them is that the story of Genesis 3 ends with God saying that this is not good, but the 6th day in Genesis 1 ends with him saying it was very good. So how could that be the same day? I mean, that's one puzzle to kind of work through. Yeah. I mean, maybe you expand out Genesis 2 and 3 a little bit longer. That's a possibility. But another way how a lot of Christians have read it is a sequential. Like, God creates humanity generically across the earth in the image of God and asks them to spread out, and they do. And then later on, at a different point in that story, God creates the garden and places Adam and Eve within it as a sacred humanity by which he, as a priestly role by which he is going to come into relationship with all of humanity. Some theologians and some exegetes love that sequential view. Some of them hate it. It kind of works either way, though, from my point of view. But I think that that's one of the big debates to be working out. Is so we understand Genesis 1 and 2 as sequential, or as recapitulatory, or maybe some sort of both and.
Okay. Let's move on from that. Genesis 2. It describes the creation of Adam. Is there a hint here that Adam's creation took a long time? Simply because it says that at the beginning, when God began to create Adam, no shrub or plant had appeared on the earth. Yet when he's fully formed, he's planted in a garden. I mean, that takes time.
Think that's actually, that helps you, because
no?
The term on the earth is talking about eretz. Eretz is very clearly defined in Scripture as that area. And so it's saying that he came down, and at that point there was no look. You can go to a sand lot and go there and say, "Hey, I'm going to be setting up a garden here," and at this time there's
nothing here.
At this point, there's no shrub on the ground that's appeared. That doesn't mean if you go back 1,000,000 years ago, it was still just a sand lot. It could have had plants back then. It's just meaning that, like, you showed up, as it says, he showed up to plant the garden, and there was no shrubs there yet in the eretz, and so he started to plant the garden. That's all it's saying. And to kind of take that as this grand statement about the very first shrubs across the entire globe, I think is a pretty strong. I would say that goes into a misunderstanding of actually what the text is saying. And it's definitely, but I do think what you're getting at, though, is that there's been, I think, 2 ways that I think are both quite strong for understanding those texts. One is to understand Adam and Eve being created literally out of like a handful of mud that God shapes into like a mud statue and then breeds into like de novo creation without parents. That's how maybe most of the church have understood it. As we've understood that it's possible God can create people out of evolutionary processes or processes of common descent, and then also looking at how Scripture uses the term "out of the dust" throughout other places. The term is often used in Scripture to mean mortality. So a lot of Christians have said that have actually kind of backed away from the de novo understanding to even when we see it as like a very, very descriptive, just strong description of being created out of common ancestors of the great apes. God forming humanity out of the dust is not that I mean, that sounds to be like a very clear statement of what God's doing when He is, forming humanity out of non-human ancestors, right? So how do you make sense of that? Well, I think it could be a both and. Maybe God really did make Adam and Eve out of the dust without parents, but it was a typological echo, like a prophecy backwards. That is supposed to have deep resonance with how He created us out of the dust of the earth, meaning the apes of the earth. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those places where, I mean, I'm tend to drawn to places where you can make space for multiple legitimate readings at once.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I think that it's both it. It's both a quick creation of Adam and Eve, but it's echoing the process that took, millions of years. And so it is a long process that He created humanity, but He created Adam and Eve quickly in a way that echoed that long process. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. Certainly does. Yeah.